The sea remembers things men forget. Before kingdoms rose or the sun touched the grand line, the ocean whispered of two storms, two wills that could have shattered heaven itself. One was fire, wild and radiant, Gall D. Roger, the man who laughed at the world's chains. The other was thunder, Rox D. Xebec, the shadow that sought to rule the very sky. They were not meant to coexist. Yet somewhere in the turning wheel of fate, the waves wondered, what if they had? Would the world have found freedom or fallen into silence forever? The sea, eternal and unjudging, carries both names still, one in gold, one in blood. And between them the echo of what might have been, a tale the world was not ready to bear. Before we set sail across this altered sea of fate, join our voyage, so these stories of what might have been are never lost to time. The world was still young when the wind began to change. The seas were cruel then, wilder, less forgiving, as if the world itself had not yet learned to breathe in peace. Men who sailed them did not seek adventure or treasure. They sought proof that their hearts could defy the ocean's indifference. And among them was a man who laughed louder than thunder, Gall D. Roger, a name not yet carved into legend, not yet feared, not yet loved, just a man with a ship too small, a dream too big, and a will that refused to drown. He had not yet found Rayleigh, not yet formed the crew that would one day echo through eternity. He was still a wandering storm, searching for purpose on the endless blue. But destiny has a strange way of calling to those who listen. It does not speak in words. It sings in tempests, in the pull of tides, in the faint whisper of an approaching storm that no one else can sense.
Roger felt it first. A pressure in the air, a pulse in the sea. Something vast was moving, something ancient, pulling the world toward a single, inevitable moment. He stood at the bow of his ship, the Wanderer's Dawn, staring into the dark horizon. The air smelled of iron. The clouds were bruised purple, heavy with coming rain. And through the roar of the wind, he heard it, a sound like laughter, low and terrible, carried on the waves. That was the first time Roger heard the voice of Rox D. Xebec. The island appeared before him like a scar on the sea, Hachinosu, the hive of pirates, a place where no law reached. It was said that men who arrived there never left unchanged. The strong became kings, and the weak became bones beneath the sand. Roger came alone. He had no crew, no banner, no name worth fearing. Only that strange smile, the kind that made even killers hesitate, not out of mercy, but confusion. For how could a man smile like that in a place where hope went to die? The taverns were loud with violence. Glass broke, men shouted, dreams burned like rum. And at the center of it all sat Rox D. Xebec. He was not a man. He was a storm given flesh. Eyes like abyssal fire, a grin carved with fury, and a voice that made the walls tremble. Around him sat the monsters of a future age, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, names that would one day shape the world, but who now bowed to him like dogs before their master. When Roger entered, the air shifted. Rocks turned, and for a moment the two storms met. No words, just a silence so sharp it felt like the ocean itself was holding its breath.
"You have the eyes of a fool," Rox said at last, his tone half amusement, half threat. Roger's grin widened. "And you have the laugh of a god who's forgotten how to be human." Laughter filled the room, but beneath it was tension, the kind that births legends. Rox rose from his seat, his shadow swallowing the light. "Do you know who I am, boy?" Roger tilted his head. A man trying too hard to make the world remember his name. A pause. Then, impossibly, Rox laughed. Not the cruel laughter of dominance, but something deeper, like a man hearing his own echo for the first time. "You've got guts," he said. "I like that." Roger raised an eyebrow. "And you've got madness. I like that." It was there, in that dim tavern of devils, that fate twisted upon itself. Two men who should have been enemies became reflections, two sides of the same unstoppable dream. Rox, the ruler who sought to claim the heavens. Roger, the wanderer who sought to understand them. The sea would never be the same again. For weeks, Roger sailed under Rock's shadow. The Rock's pirates were less a crew and more a collection of gods at war with themselves. Whitebeard's laughter cracked like thunder. Big Mom's hunger devoured the night. Kaido's drunken roars echoed from the deck like the cries of a caged beast. And in the middle of it all, Roger, watching, learning, listening. He saw how Rox inspired loyalty through fear, and fear through glory. He watched him speak of a world beyond kings and slaves, a world where one man ruled it all. Rox called it freedom. Roger called it madness. But deep down he understood. For was not his own dream a rebellion against the same chains? They stood together on the deck one night as lightning clawed the sky. Rox gazed toward the horizon, the wind tearing at his coat. "Do you know why the world government fears me, Roger?" "Because you're insane," Roger replied lightly. Rox chuckled. "No, because I remember. I remember what they buried. The world before the celestial dragons, before the chains. A world of gods and men, not masters and slaves." Roger frowned. "You speak like a ghost." Rock's eyes turned distant. "Maybe I am. But even ghosts can dream, and my dream is to reclaim the sea from heaven itself." The rain began to fall. Roger said nothing. He only looked at the man beside him, the man who carried the same will, twisted by rage instead of wonder. In that storm, something unspoken passed between them, a promise, a warning, a prophecy. Weeks turned into months. Their alliance spread terror across the seas. Kingdoms burned, navy fleets vanished into the waves. The world government whispered in fear that the will of D had awakened once more. But inside Roger, the laughter began to fade. He saw children cry on burning shores. He saw the eyes of the weak, those who dreamed not of freedom, but of simple peace. And he began to wonder if Rock's dream was not freedom at all, but conquest, wearing freedom's mask. The final straw came on a nameless island, a small village, caught in the path of Rox's fury. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. And in the silence, Roger heard a sound that broke him. The laughter of Rox D. Xebec, triumphant, hollow, infinite. Roger's fists clenched. "Tell me," he said, his voice trembling with something close to grief, "when did freedom become the right to destroy?" Rox turned to him slowly. "When the world chained us first." And there, between lightning and ash, Roger realized they were both right. And that made it worse. The sea raged that night as if echoing their hearts. The sky split in two, and from the horizon came the whisper of destiny, the sound of drums, distant but growing louder, the drums of liberation. Roger didn't know what they were, not yet, but when he heard them, his chest ached with recognition. He felt the ocean breathe. He felt the sky open. And for a brief, eternal moment, he understood. Freedom was not power, it was connection. The laughter that binds all things, the heartbeat of the world. Rock saw only conquest. Roger saw the dawn. And so began the quiet end of their alliance. The meeting of storms fated to break the heavens apart. The sea carried their silence for many days. The Rock's pirates continued their rampage, but the laughter between Roger and Xebec was gone. They stood side by side, but the distance between them was now a gulf deeper than the calm belt. The world did not yet know, but the seeds of God Valley had already been sown. The next morning came without sunrise. The sea was iron gray, as if mourning something not yet lost. Roger stood at the edge of the deck, the taste of salt and ash on his tongue. The Rock's pirates had anchored near an island rich with gold. Another conquest, another meaningless victory. But Roger saw no glory in it. Below him, men shouted, dragging prisoners from burning ships, their cries swallowed by the thunder. He watched it all with a hollow gaze. Rocks appeared beside him, a silhouette against the storm. His coat flared like wings, his grin sharp as the blade at his hip. "You look disappointed," he said, voice low, rumbling with amusement. Roger didn't turn. "I thought the sea was big enough for dreams. Turns out it's just another battlefield." Rocks laughed softly. "Dreams are for fools who haven't bled enough. The world doesn't need dreamers, Roger. It needs kings." "Kings?" Roger's tone hardened. "Or tyrants?" Rock's eyes glimmered with something unreadable. "There's no difference once the world bows." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain fell harder, drumming against the deck like war drums. Then, Rocks leaned closer. "You think freedom means doing what you want," he murmured. "But real freedom is when everyone else must obey your will." Roger's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but in his silence, the rift between them deepened like a crack spreading across the hull of a ship. Rock smiled, not with joy, but with prophecy. "One day, boy, you'll see it my way, or you'll drown trying not to." And then he walked away. Roger remained, staring at the endless gray. He whispered to the wind so softly, only the sea could hear. "Then let me drown." The weeks that followed were madness. The Rock's pirates carved their name across the seas. They conquered islands, toppled kings, and silenced entire fleets. Every victory fed Rox's legend, and Roger's doubt. He began to see the pattern. Every island burned the same way. Every cheer sounded like a dirge. And though the world called them gods, Roger saw ghosts. Yet he stayed, because somewhere beneath the violence, he sensed something deeper, something calling from the ocean's heart. It came again one night, a sound beneath the waves, a hum, soft but endless, older than the stars. The same rhythm as before, the drums of liberation. He followed the sound to the edge of the ship, eyes closed, hand over his heart. The pulse matched his own. It was not just sound, it was truth. He felt it then. The world itself was alive. The sea was not just water, it was memory. He smiled faintly. "So this is freedom." But before the warmth could settle, a voice shattered the night. "Roger!" It was Whitebeard, younger and fiercer, his blade gleaming under lightning. "The captain's calling you. He says it's time." "Time for what?" Roger asked. Whitebeard grinned. "To make history." They gathered in the captain's quarters. Rocks, Big Mom, Kaido, Whitebeard, Shiki, and Roger. Maps littered the table, ink bleeding into lines that marked kingdoms soon to fall. Rox's voice filled the room like a storm. "The world nobles, the celestial dragons, their bloodlines sit on the throne of the world, untouchable, untamed. But even gods can bleed. We'll remind them." A murmur swept through the room, excitement, greed, awe. But Roger stayed silent. Rox turned his gaze upon him. "You quiet, boy. Have you lost your taste for glory?" Roger met his eyes. "You call it glory. I call it revenge." Rox's grin vanished. "Revenge is the seed of freedom." "No," Roger said softly. "It's the seed of another cage." The room fell still. Kaido's hand drifted toward his weapon. Big Mom's laughter curdled into warning. But Rox only smiled again. Slow, deliberate, dangerous.
"You think too small, Roger. You look at the world and see chains. I see a crown waiting to be claimed." Roger's reply was quiet, but it carried the weight of eternity. "Then maybe we were never meant to sail the same sea." Rox's smile faded, and in that silence, the storm outside began to roar. Later that night, Roger sat alone by the railing, the rain cold against his face. He thought of the boy he had been, the one who believed the sea was endless, that laughter could conquer fear. Now, the laughter was gone. He took a deep breath, letting the salt air burn his lungs. "The world doesn't need kings," he whispered. "It needs someone to set it free." Behind him, footsteps. Whitebeard's voice, low, uncertain. "You planning to run?" Roger smiled faintly. "Not yet." Whitebeard leaned on the railing beside him. "He's insane, you know? Rocks. He's gonna bring down the sky." Roger nodded. "Maybe that's what it takes for the world to change." "Or to burn," Whitebeard said. Roger laughed softly. "Same difference?" They stood in silence, the sea rising and falling below them. Two men who would one day shape the age to come, watching the night swallow the horizon. In the distance, lightning carved the world in white. And in that brief flash, Roger thought he saw something, a shape beneath the waves, vast and ancient, moving like a heartbeat. It was gone before he could name it, but he felt it watching. The sea was listening, and the world was waiting. Far away in Marijos, the 5 elders gathered in a chamber of light. One of them looked up from a trembling report. Rox D. Xebec and Gold D. Roger, sailing together. Silence. Another elder closed his eyes. "Then the age of gods is ending." "No," the oldest said. "It's beginning again." Outside, thunder cracked like a cannon, and somewhere in the dark, the will of D laughed, the laughter of those who refused to kneel, echoing across the tides. The world had begun to tremble. The meeting of storms was complete. The next day, the sky did not rise blue, it bled gold and crimson. A celestial dawn, like a warning written across the heavens. The Rox pirates prepared for war. Their destination, God Valley, an island whose very name would be erased from maps. Whispers said the celestial dragons were gathering there, guarded by the full might of the Marines. Whispers said Rox planned to seize them, not for ransom, but for judgment.
Roger stood at the prow as the fleet cut through the waves. The sea frothed white, the wind screamed. He watched the sun rise behind them, the world ahead swallowed in storm. Every instinct told him this was the edge, the line between man and myth. And yet, a strange peace filled his chest. Because for all the madness, for all the blood that would be spilled, Roger felt he was exactly where fate wanted him to be. "Captain," came a voice behind him, Whitebeard, his tone unreadable. "You sure about this?" Roger turned, the wind pulling his coat like a flag of defiance. "I've never been sure of anything," he said, smiling. "That's what makes life worth sailing." Whitebeard's laughter rolled like distant thunder. "You're a fool, Roger." "I know," Roger said softly, but sometimes it takes a fool to dream. When they reached God Valley, the air itself felt alive. It was said that ancient weapons once slept beneath those cliffs, that the soil still remembered the songs of the Void Century. Even the sea grew quiet as they approached, as if unwilling to witness what was about to unfold. The Marines waited, fleets upon fleets, banners snapping in the wind, and above them, upon the sacred hill, the celestial dragons watched with disdain. Rock stood at the head of his armada, eyes blazing with godlike fury. "This is it," he roared. "Today the world bends or breaks." The fleet thundered forward, cannons roared, the sea erupted, and so began the Battle of God Valley, a battle history would never truly remember, yet whose echoes would shape centuries. Roger fought like the storm he was named for. He moved through chaos with laughter on his lips, his sword cutting through the roar of war. Every strike was defiance. Every breath was freedom.
But even as he fought, his heart trembled, because he could feel it, the ocean crying beneath them, the world itself screaming. He looked up at Rox, standing upon the hill like a dark sun, his power shaking the sky. And in that moment, Roger understood. This wasn't war. This was the world breaking its own heart. Rox raised his arms to the heavens. Lightning split the clouds. His voice rolled like judgment itself. "Do you see, Roger? This is the truth. The world is rotten. It must be burned before it can be free." Roger, blood on his face, looked up and shouted back, "Freedom isn't something you destroy the world to find." Rox's laughter echoed, vast and terrible. "You still don't understand, boy. Freedom is everything, even the right to destroy." Their words clashed louder than steel. For a heartbeat, all sound vanished, just wind and sea trembling between them. Roger whispered, almost sadly, "Then you were never free, Rox. You've only traded one cage for another." The ground exploded between them. Steel met steel. Hockey burned the air. The clash of their wills split the island, gold and black lightning tearing through heaven and earth. It was not a duel between men. It was a war between wills, one born of fury, the other of joy. Rock's conqueror's hockey roared like the wrath of gods, but Roger's laughter broke through it, bright and defiant. For every blow Rock struck, Roger met it not with hatred, but with life. "You laugh in the face of the end," Rox bellowed. Roger smiled through blood. "Because I've already found it, the reason the sea sings. It's not power, Rox, it's connection, the world's heartbeat." Their blades met one last time, light swallowing sound. The island quaked, the ocean screamed, and when the dust cleared, only one man stood. Rox, bleeding, laughing through broken teeth. "You think you've won, but you've only delayed it." He leaned close, his voice a whisper of thunder. "The world you dream of already exists beneath the sea." Then he fell, laughing still, into the chasm below. The sea swallowed him whole, and as he sank into the darkness, the storm above began to fade. Roger stood on the ruined shore, the dawn breaking red across the horizon. The sea was quiet again. The cries of the dying were distant. He looked out across the waves, eyes filled not with triumph, but sorrow. The world would never know what truly happened that day. The world government would hide it, the Marines would bury it, and the name Rox D. Xebec would be erased from history. But Roger would remember, because in the man he killed, he had seen the reflection of his own dream, twisted, but real. He whispered to the wind, "You were wrong, old friend, but you weren't a liar." Then, softly, as if to himself, "One day the sea will laugh again, and someone will finish what we began." The tide carried his words away into the endless blue, and the world turned, unaware that two storms had met, and from their meeting a new dawn had begun to form. The will of D had survived, waiting for the next generation to awaken it. Years passed like waves breaking on the same eternal shore. The name Rox D. Xebec faded from the tongues of men, buried under silence, scrubbed from history as if he had never existed. But the sea remembered, and so did Gol D. Roger. The man, once known for reckless laughter, had become quieter, though his smile still burned with life. The world saw a pirate rising to myth, but beneath the glory there was grief, the shadow of a storm that had once called him brother. The age that followed was one of iron and fire. The world government rebuilt its walls. The Marines swore vengeance, and in the ashes of God Valley, the balance of the world tilted, ever so slightly, toward fear. But the seas were never kind to fear, because every time a tyrant rose, the ocean answered with a dreamer. Roger stood at the helm of the Oro Jackson, the ship Tom himself had forged, its figurehead carved like a laughing lion facing the wind. Behind him, his crew laughed, fought, and dreamed as if the world were not breaking beneath their feet. Rayleigh leaned against the mast, a bottle of sake in hand. "You've been quiet again," he said, voice rough with the salt of too many battles. "That's never a good sign."
Roger smiled faintly. The sea's been whispering again. Rayleigh arched an eyebrow. "The sea doesn't whisper, it tries to drown us." "Then maybe that's its way of talking." The first mate chuckled, shaking his head. "Only you would argue philosophy with the ocean, Captain." Roger's smile deepened. "The ocean's the only thing worth arguing with." He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the sunlight bled gold through storm clouds. "I keep thinking about him," he murmured. "Rocks?" Roger nodded. He was wrong, but he wasn't blind. Rayleigh's eyes softened. "You still think he knew something?" Roger's expression grew distant, almost reverent. "When he said the world I dreamed of already existed beneath the sea, I thought it was madness. But what if he was right?" Rayleigh said nothing. He had learned long ago that when Roger spoke like this, half sailor, half prophet, it was better to let the silence carry the weight. The Grand Line had grown darker. Pirates ruled like kings. Kingdoms turned on each other. The government's justice stretched thin, its truth twisting like a rope around the neck of the world. And yet, amidst all this chaos, Roger's name rose higher, brighter. He did not conquer, he discovered. He did not enslave, he inspired. Every island they touched remembered him not as a tyrant, but as a storm that brought laughter in its wake. But peace, even the kind found in adventure, was fragile.
On the deck one night, beneath a crescent moon, Kozuki Odin approached Roger, his sword at his side and his smile burning like a fire that refused to die. "You asked me once about the writing on the poneglyphs," Odin said. "I think I've found a way to read them all." Roger's head lifted sharply. "All of them?" Odin nodded. "There's a road through history, 4 stones that mark the way. They call them the road poneglyphs. Follow them all, and you'll reach the place where the world ends." Roger's laughter split the night like a cannon. "So that's it, the end of the world, the beginning of everything." Odin grinned. "You really think something's there?" Roger's eyes gleamed. "Not something, Odin, someone. The truth, the heartbeat of the world." He turned to his crew, voice thundering through the wind. "We're setting sail for the final island." The crew erupted in cheers, but deep within Roger's chest, the laughter trembled, not with joy, but with destiny. As they journeyed deeper into the new world, strange things began to happen. Islands whispered to them. The wind carried songs they could not name. Roger began to hear things, the trees, the stones, even the sea itself, all speaking in voices older than the world. He told Rayleigh one night, as the ship drifted through mist, "I can hear them. Everything. The world itself." Rayleigh frowned. "You mean?" Roger nodded. "The voice of all things."
For a moment, neither spoke. The air seemed to pulse around them. Rayleigh finally said, softly, "Then maybe that's what the D stands for." Roger smiled. "No, it stands for the will that never dies." He turned his gaze toward the horizon, his eyes wet with something that wasn't sorrow. "It's still there, Rayleigh. The dream, even after rocks, even after all the blood." Rayleigh exhaled, slow and deep. "Then maybe he didn't lose." "No," Roger said. "Maybe he became the silence that lets the next laugh begin." But the seas were changing. The Marines were hunting him. The sickness in his body, the one he never spoke of, had begun to hollow him from within. Each morning, he woke with blood on his lips. Each night, he hid it behind laughter. The sea didn't need to tell him his time was running out. He could feel it in the way the stars seemed to draw closer, as if waiting. He looked to the sky and whispered, "If I die, let someone else inherit this dream. Let them find the laughter at the end of the world." The sea whispered back, a voice softer than the tide, "They will." And Roger smiled, because he believed it. Even in an age of iron and fire, he still believed.
The winds of the new world carried stories faster than ships. Everywhere Roger's crew went, rumors followed, of laughter that could shake the heavens, of a man who smiled before the storm, of a pirate who sought not gold or glory, but the truth of the sea itself. They called him mad. They called him holy. Both were true. And as his legend grew, so did the fear within the hearts of kings. In Merigeois, the 5 elders whispered in rooms without windows. "This man walks the same path as him," one muttered. "Another who bears the D. History must not repeat itself." And in the shadow beyond the light, a presence far older than even they, a silent sovereign, opened ancient eyes and watched. The Oro Jackson sailed through thunder and time. Each island brought new laughter, new danger, and new fragments of the forgotten world. In the ruins of Shandora, Roger placed his hand upon the ancient stone and heard the voices of those long dead. They spoke not of conquest, but of connection, of a time when men and gods shared the same sky, before the world was broken, before truth was buried under lies. Rayleigh stood beside him, watching the glow of hockey shimmer faintly in Roger's palm. "You can really hear them, can't you?" he whispered. Roger nodded. "They're still here, Rayleigh. Every voice, every dream. The world hasn't forgotten. It's just waiting for someone to listen." He turned toward the sea. "The ocean's been speaking since the beginning, but no one ever truly hears it. Not the celestial dragons, not the marines, not even rocks. They all tried to command it." Rayleigh smiled faintly. "And you?" Roger's grin was small, almost tender. "I just want to laugh with it."
Weeks passed. They sailed through seas that sang, skies that burned, storms that seemed alive. They faced islands of ice that spoke in silence, volcanoes that roared with memories of gods. And through it all, Roger's health waned like a dying star. Only Crocus, their ship's doctor, knew how deep the sickness ran. Each night he stood outside the captain's quarters, listening to Roger's coughs turn to quiet gasps. He entered once, finding Roger staring out the window at the sea, blood staining his handkerchief crimson. "You should rest," Crocus said softly. Roger smiled weakly. "Rest when the ocean does." Crocus frowned. "You won't make it to the end of this journey if you keep pushing yourself." Roger laughed, a sound too bright for a dying man. "Then I'll just make sure the journey ends before I do." Crocus sighed. "You know, you're impossible." "Of course. That's why I'm alive at all." One night, as they approached another nameless island, Roger gathered his crew on deck. The moon was high, vast and full, silver light painting every face. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried like wind over still water. "My friends, you followed me farther than any sane man should, and I need you to know something." Rayleigh folded his arms. "You're dying."
Roger chuckled. "You always ruin my dramatic moments." Rayleigh's eyes softened. "You're not hiding it as well as you think." Roger exhaled. The sea's been calling me home for a while now." Odin took a step forward. "Then let's make this voyage worth dying for." Roger's grin flared, wild and radiant. "That's exactly my thought. We'll reach the final island, we'll find the truth, and we'll laugh loud enough that the gods themselves remember our names." His voice rose, filling the night. "Because we are not kings, we are not slaves. We are the sea's memory, the echo of every dream the world tried to drown." The crew erupted into cheers, their laughter crashing like waves. Even those who knew death was near could not help but believe, and the sea, hearing them, seemed to smile. But in the dark between stars, shadows stirred. Word of Roger's voyage had reached the Marines. The world government could not allow another storm to rise, not after God Valley. Fleet Admiral Sengoku assembled his greatest forces. Garp, the hero of the Marines, was called once more. But Garp only laughed. "You want me to stop Roger? You don't stop a tide, you ride it." "Don't be a fool," Sengoku snapped. "If he finds whatever lies at the end of the world, everything we've built could collapse." Garp's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe it deserves to." The world began to turn faster. Every wave seemed to carry prophecy. Every gust of wind seemed to whisper laugh-tale.
Roger's laughter grew louder, but behind it, his body weakened. Each sunrise was a gift, each sunset a farewell. Yet he never faltered. He never lost that wild, impossible smile, the one that had defied rocks, the one that had carried him through war and grief and legend. And the closer they sailed to the edge of the world, the stronger that smile became. Because Roger could feel it now, the truth waiting just beyond the horizon, pulsing like a heartbeat under the waves. Something vast, something ancient, something alive. The same thing rocks had whispered about in his final breath. The world beneath the sea. The storm clouds thickened. The winds howled like gods remembering their grief. The sea was no longer just water, it was memory, and it was calling them home. And Gold D. Roger, laughing through blood, whispered to his crew, "We're close. The world's final voice is just ahead." Then he closed his eyes, hearing it again, the drums of liberation beating beneath the waves. The same rhythm that once echoed at God Valley.
The same heartbeat that would one day belong to a boy born of dawn. The age of iron and fire was nearing its end, but something greater, something eternal, was about to awaken. And the sea, older than gods, older than truth itself, began to hum. Because it recognized that sound, the will of D had begun to beat again. The storm had followed them for days, a living wall of black clouds that wrapped the horizon, rumbling like the heartbeat of something immense. The crew had grown silent. Even the sea seemed to hesitate. Roger stood at the bow, rain soaking his coat, his eyes fixed ahead. He could feel it now, the weight of centuries pressing against his chest, the murmur of forgotten ages swimming beneath the waves. Rayleigh joined him, his hair plastered by rain. "You feel it too, don't you?" Roger nodded slowly. "Aye, it's like the world's holding its breath." "The end?" Rayleigh asked. Roger smiled. "The beginning." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he could see it. The laughter of ages, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the countless lives that had lived and died trying to reach this same horizon. And through it all, one thread endured. The laughter that defied despair. The laughter that said, "We are not done yet." They broke through the storm at dawn. The world beyond was silent, almost sacred. A sea of gold mist stretched before them, and in its center an island, vast and glimmering, wrapped in light. It was not on any map. It was not meant to be found, but it was waiting for them. Odin gasped, eyes wide. "Is this?" Roger nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, this is it. The end of the Grand Line." He stepped forward, the mist curling around his boots like living memory. Every sound seemed distant, even the wind dared not intrude. They disembarked onto soil that glowed faintly, as though it remembered sunlight the rest of the world had forgotten. Ancient trees whispered in tongues older than time. The air hummed with warmth, like the breath of the planet itself. And at the heart of the island, a monument, carved with the language of the lost, the final poneglyph. Roger's hands trembled as he traced the ancient letters. Odin stood beside him, translating with reverence. It tells of a kingdom that united the world in laughter, not by fear, but by freedom. It tells of a power that could destroy everything or heal it. And it tells of a promise, one that would echo until the sea itself laughed again. Roger listened in silence. Then he began to laugh. It wasn't madness or disbelief. It was joy. Pure, aching joy. He laughed until tears streamed down his face, until his crew joined him, their voices rising into the sky like a chorus. The sound filled the island, the air, the sea. The whole world seemed to laugh with them. They laughed at the truth, at the beauty, at the absurdity of it all. Because the secret the world had hidden for centuries wasn't a weapon or a curse, it was a punchline. A truth so simple, so boundless, that only laughter could hold it. And in that laughter, they understood everything. Roger lay in the grass long after the laughter had faded. The sun warmed his face, the sea sighed softly beyond the cliffs. Rayleigh sat beside him, silent. After a while, Roger said quietly, "This world, it's not ready." Rayleigh nodded. "Not yet." Roger turned his gaze toward the horizon. "But one day, someone will be. Someone who can hear the sea laugh again." Rayleigh looked at him, his throat tight. "And until then," Roger smiled, "we keep the laughter alive." He reached into his coat and pulled out a single eternal pose, the last marker that would lead any who found it to this place.
He pressed it into Rayleigh's hand. Guard it. When the sea sings again, let them find it. Rayleigh closed his fingers around it, his voice barely above the wind. You think they'll come? Roger's eyes softened. They always do. When they returned to the ship, the world already felt different. The sky was bluer, the wind warmer, the sea more alive. But Roger's strength was failing. His laughter came with blood now. His steps grew slower. And yet, he seemed lighter, as if in finding the world's end, he had set down the weight of all his grief. He gathered his crew one last time beneath the stars. They sat around a fire, the ocean quiet around them. My friends, Roger began, we've seen it, the truth the world feared. And now we know, laughter is stronger than death. He paused, his eyes bright. The world will forget us. They'll hide what we found. But one day, someone will come who carries the same flame. Someone who'll laugh at the same joke.
He raised his cup to the sea, to the future, to those who will inherit our will. They drank. The stars seemed to lean closer. Later, when the fire had died, Roger stood alone by the railing. He looked out at the horizon one last time, whispering to the sea, "You were right, rocks. The world I dreamed of does exist, not beneath the sea, but within it, in every heart that still dares to laugh." A wave broke softly against the hull, like applause. Roger smiled. "Thank you." He closed his eyes and listened to the rhythm beneath the waves, to the heartbeat of the world, the drums of liberation. Faint, but alive. He whispered, "One day, someone will dance to that sound." And the sea, vast and eternal, whispered back, "They already are." Thus ended the age of iron and fire, and began the slow awakening of the age of dreams. The sea turned, the tides shifted, and somewhere, unseen, the next dawn began to stir. History is a fragile thing. It bends beneath the weight of kings and cracks beneath the laughter of fools. And when it breaks, the sea carries away what remains, leaving only whispers, fragments, and the ache of what was lost. The world would remember God Valley as the day Rocks D. Xebec fell. But the truth, buried deeper than any archive, was that it was also the day the sea itself chose its next dreamer. For while the world moved on, the ghosts of that island did not rest. They waited beneath the waves, waiting for the man who had slain their captain to face his own judgment. And that day came sooner than Roger expected. The years following Laugh Tale were brief and burning. Roger's laughter still filled the seas, but his time was running out. The illness had reached his bones. His blood, once bright with fire, now whispered of endings. He sailed not for treasure anymore, but for closure. Every island became a farewell, every sunrise a memory of the one that might be his last. On the deck of the Oro Jackson, the crew had grown quieter too. Even Buggy, loudest of them all, no longer mocked the silence. Perhaps they all sensed what Roger never said aloud, that the man who could laugh in the face of gods was dying. But fate, cruel and poetic, was not done with him yet. It began with a shadow on the horizon, a marine flag flanked by ships Roger recognized too well. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed. Sengoku. Roger smiled faintly. And Garp. The fleet advanced, cannons glinting like teeth, But Roger didn't call for retreat. He stood tall at the bow, his coat snapping in the wind, eyes blazing with something between nostalgia and defiance. "Tell me, Rayleigh," he said softly, "do you believe men like us ever really die?" Rayleigh's jaw tightened. "You're talking like a ghost again." "Maybe I am, but ghosts are just memories that refuse to sink." The battle that followed was legend, though none would live to tell it truthfully. Cannon fire roared, lightning split the sky. Roger fought like a man already beyond fear, his sword singing with the same rhythm as the sea.
And across from him, Garp, his old rival, his equal, his mirror. Each strike was not hatred, but understanding. Each blow, a confession. When their blades locked, Garp's voice thundered through the chaos. "Why, Roger? Why keep fighting when you've already found what you were looking for?" Roger's laughter rang through the smoke. "Because I want the world to find it too. You'll die for this dream." Roger grinned. "Then I'll die laughing." Their clash shook the ocean, their wills colliding like storms reborn. But beneath the fury, a strange peace existed, the kind only two men who understood each other completely could share. When the smoke cleared, Rogers stood upon the deck, his sword broken, his coat torn, blood staining the sea. Garp knelt before him, chest heaving. "Why don't you run, Garp? You could escape. You always do." Roger's smile was quiet now. "Because I've reached the end, old friend. And the end is only the beginning." He lifted his gaze toward the heavens. "But before I go, I'll give them one last story to chase." Garp's brow furrowed. "What are you planning?" Roger didn't answer. He simply laughed. That same mad, beautiful laughter that made even the sea pause. And Garp understood. Roger would not die as a criminal. He would die as a legend. Days later, word spread across the world like wildfire. The Pirate King has surrendered.
The man who had conquered the Grand Line, who had touched the world's forbidden truth, walked willingly to his death. The Marines celebrated. The celestial dragons rejoiced. But the sea grew restless, because it knew what the world did not, that Roger's surrender was not an ending, it was an ignition. They brought him to Logtown, the place where his life had begun. Rain fell softly as the crowd gathered, 1,000 voices rising in disbelief and awe. Roger stood upon the scaffold, hands bound, but spirit unbroken. He looked not at the Marines, not at the nobles, but at the sea beyond, and he smiled. In that moment, Garp stood among the soldiers, his hat low, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. Sengoku watched from afar, fists clenched in futile triumph. And somewhere among the crowd, a thief with red hair, a swordsman yet to find his purpose, a boy not yet born, the echoes of Roger's will began to awaken. A Marine asked him his final question. "Gold D. Roger, do you have any last words?" Roger's grin flared, wild, radiant, unstoppable. "My treasure?" he said. "It's out there, all of it, waiting for you." The crowd gasped, the world tilted, and then he shouted, his laughter soaring above the storm. "Go find it if you can!" Steel flashed. The sea fell silent.
And in that silence, the world changed. Rayleigh, far across the sea, felt the shift. He looked up from his cup of sake and smiled through his tears. "The age of dreams has begun," he whispered.
Because when Roger died, he did not vanish. He became the wind, the tide, the promise of dawn. And the sea, ever watchful, carried his laughter to every corner of the world, whispering to the hearts of those who still dared to dream. But beneath that laughter, in the black depths of the world, something else stirred. A shadow awoke where light could not reach. The echo of another D, long thought gone, Rox D. Xebec. The sea had not forgotten him either. And the ocean, eternal, impartial, unmerciful, knew one truth above all others. When one storm dies, another is always waiting to rise. The waves were calm that night, almost too calm, as if the sea itself were holding its breath. The world above rejoiced at Roger's death, singing songs of peace and order. But the sea, older than any kingdom, knew better. Because death, to the sea, was only a change in tide. And beneath those depths, deep beyond the reach of sun or sound, the current trembled. There, between ruins forgotten since the void century, something vast began to stir. A heartbeat, slow, relentless, familiar. The world had buried his name, but the ocean never forgets its children. Rox D. Xebec had fallen at God Valley, yet his will had not sunk with him. The sea, bound by no law of men or gods, had carried his echo into eternity, a memory waiting to be reborn.
And that night, it whispered again. Rayleigh awoke on Sabaody to the sound of thunder that wasn't thunder. He rose from his hammock, heart pounding. The storm outside was unnatural. Not wind, but pressure. A wave of conqueror's hockey so immense that even the sky seemed to flinch. He stumbled on to the dock, rain slicing through the darkness, and looked toward the horizon. For a moment, he thought he saw it, a shadow upon the sea, enormous, human, yet not. Eyes like storms, a grin carved from memory. Then it vanished, as if swallowed by the world itself. Rayleigh's breath shook. Impossible. He felt it again, the same sensation he'd felt decades ago at God Valley. The meeting of storms, but one of them was supposed to be gone. Meanwhile, on an island near the New World, Shiki, the golden lion, raised his glass toward the storm clouds. "So, the sea remembers after all," he muttered, laughter rough as broken gold. "Old Rox, you stubborn bastard." He turned to his men. "Prepare the ships. The world's about to remember fear." Far below Marie-Joy, beneath the Holy Land where the air was thin and the walls bled secrets, an ancient chamber stirred. The 5 elders gathered in silence before the great throne, the one that was never meant to be sat upon. And there, within the lightless room, he waited. A figure veiled in shadow, eyes glinting like the moon reflected in still water. The one they called Emu. The eldest elder spoke, his voice trembling despite his centuries of control. "It has begun again." Emu's voice was calm, soft as the ocean before a storm. "The sea reawakens what the world refuses to remember. Rox, a will, a memory, perhaps even a curse." Silence. Then the figure leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "The D still moves," Emu murmured. "As long as the sea breathes, their kind will rise. The world must not laugh again." But the sea did laugh. It laughed with storms, with waves, with the birth cries of new pirates setting sail, chasing the treasure of a man who had already turned into legend. The great pirate era had begun. And though none of them knew it yet, every ship that cut through the Grand Line,
Every flag that rose against tyranny carried a fragment of those two storms, Roger and Rocks, still clashing across the currents of destiny. Somewhere in the East Blue, a woman cradled her newborn son. The boy's cries were wild, echoing through the rain like laughter. The nurse shivered. "He's loud." The mother smiled faintly. "No, he's free." The boy's name would one day shake the world, Monkey D. Luffy, though for now he was only a heartbeat in a storm that had begun before he was born. And somewhere, unseen, the sea whispered his destiny, the one who will laugh again. Rayleigh sat alone that night, bottle in hand, staring into the endless dark. He thought of Roger, his laughter, his last words, the way the sea had seemed to smile at him. He thought of Rocks, the madness, the fire, the final words before he fell. "The world you dream of already exists beneath the sea." He whispered into the wind, "Was that your curse, Rocks, or your hope?" The sea didn't answer, but in the distance, thunder rolled like laughter. Rayleigh smiled sadly. I suppose it doesn't matter."
He raised his glass to the storm, to the fools who keep laughing. But in the dark depths beneath the red line, something ancient opened its eyes, and this time it wasn't a memory. It was awakening. A voice rumbled through the water, not sound, but will. The same words Roger once heard in dreams, now spoken with the weight of the abyss. The sea remembers. Lightning split the sky, casting light across the waves for one fleeting instant. And in that instant, if one looked closely, they might have seen two figures standing side by side atop the water. One laughing, one silent, both eternal. The sea has two faces. One laughs beneath the sun, golden and free. The other waits in silence, deep beneath the light, the part the world forgets, where the waves keep the things too heavy for men to remember. After Roger's death, the world split along that line. Above the surface, the great pirate era began, 1,000 ships setting sail, each bearing laughter like torches in the dark. But beneath the surface, something stirred. The sea had not wept for Roger. It listened. Because when a man dies with laughter on his lips, the ocean does not call it tragedy. It calls it prophecy. In the quiet after Roger's execution, the world moved on, or tried to. Marines hunted pirates in waves, kings rose and fell, and whispers began to spread like roots through the cracks of history. There was another storm, long before Roger, one the world erased.
Those whispers reached even the darkest corners of the Grand Line, and the ears of one man who had once followed that storm, Edward Newgate, Whitebeard. He sat upon the deck of the Moby Dick, his massive frame outlined by the crimson dusk. The sea breeze carried the faint taste of salt and memory. Around him, his sons laughed, argued, sang, the sound of life. But his eyes were turned toward the horizon, where the light met the sea. "Pops," said Marco quietly, "you're thinking about him again." Whitebeard grunted, the sound low and rumbling. "Roger, aye, but not just him." Marco tilted his head. "Rocks?" Whitebeard's lips twitched, half smile, half sigh. "That name still echoes, even when the world tries to drown it. Two men, both born with that cursed letter, both dreaming to break the world open. But one laughed, and one screamed." He looked down at his hands, scarred, immense, trembling just slightly. "And I followed them both. Maybe that's my sin." Marco frowned. "Sin?" Whitebeard smiled, soft and weary. Aye, because I love them both too much to stop them. The wind shifted. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, thunder rumbled like memory. Elsewhere, in the holy land of Marijwa, beneath the stars that never shone on the lower world, the 5 elders knelt. Before them stood the shadow that never moved, the one who sat upon the empty throne. Imu's voice was cold as still water. The world trembles again. One of the elders asked, "The pirates?" "No, the sea." Another elder swallowed hard. "You mean the legacy of D?"
Imu's gaze turned toward the great mural etched upon the chamber wall, a map of the world as it was before the Void Century, when all the seas were one. "The will of D is not a name," Imu murmured. "It's a tide. You can dam a river, but you cannot stop the ocean." They bowed their heads. "What would you have us do?" Imu's fingers brushed the surface of the map, tracing the shape of the Grand Line, the scar that divided the world. The last time the sea laughed, a kingdom fell. The next time it laughs, a pause, a faint smile. The world ends. Far below, at the bottom of the calm belt, a different light flickered. In the ruins of a city swallowed by coral, something ancient hummed, an echo of the ancient kingdom, still alive in stone and sea. Bubbles drifted upward from a cracked monument, the inscriptions half buried in sand. The words, faint but clear, glowed as if remembering. Those who carry the D are not destroyers. They are bridges, laughter across the void. And though no living soul stood to read them, the sea carried their meaning upward, through current, through tide, through time. Until far above, a ship caught in a sudden swell shuddered as if it had heard a voice. That ship was small, nameless, worn by salt and years. At its bow stood a woman with hair like flame and eyes like the storm. She gazed across the water and smiled faintly. "Still talking to ghosts, are you?" she murmured to the sea. Her name was Rouge, and in her arms she carried a child not yet born, a secret the world would never forgive. She could feel him stirring, as though even in her womb he could hear the laughter of the ocean. She whispered softly, "You'll carry his will, won't you? His dream." The waves lapped gently against the hull, answering in rhythm. Rouge closed her eyes. "Then laugh, my son. Laugh so the world remembers what freedom sounds like." And as she drifted farther into the horizon, the sea whispered her answer, "We will." Back in the New World, under a sky bruised with stormlight, Monkey D. Garp stood before the graves of men history would never name. The wind tore at his coat, the same as it had the day Roger died. He had saved Roger's son, hidden him, carried his secret like a wound, but even he could not silence the ocean's laughter that haunted his dreams. He muttered to the storm, "You always had to do things your way, didn't you, Roger? You and your cursed smile." He clenched his fists, the scars on his knuckles white with memory. "And now your damn will won't let me rest." Thunder rolled in answer, distant, almost like a chuckle. Garp sighed. Yeah, I hear you." He turned to leave. "I just hope the next fool to inherit your dream knows what he's walking into." Behind him, the sea crashed against the cliffs once, twice, 3 times like applause. The age of the laughing king had ended, but his laughter still echoed through the silent sea. The world believed the tide had stilled, but the ocean knew better. It was only holding its breath, waiting for the next dawn. And somewhere in the heart of the Grand Line, the current began to turn again, the first faint heartbeat of a storm yet unborn. The sea was calm, unnaturally so. No gulls cried, no wind stirred, no waves broke. It was as though the world itself had entered mourning. But mourning to the sea is not silence, it is listening. And in that stillness, faint but unending, came the sound of laughter. Not from above,
not from ships or shores, but from the depths, soft, distant, and eternal. The echo of a man who once looked at the end of the world and laughed so hard that even the gods flinched. Beneath the moonlight, the Moby Dick drifted. Whitebeard sat alone, his great Becento resting beside him. He had drunk too much. He always did when the night refused to let him sleep. The sake burned like memory down his throat. He looked out across the black expanse, watching the stars reflected in the waves. They trembled there, like the ghosts of all those who'd once followed the will of D. "Roger," he murmured, voice breaking the hush. "You left me a world I can't protect. These seas are drowning in your dream." He closed his eyes, and in that stillness he heard it again, that laughter. Faint, but real. For a moment he thought it was Roger's, but no, it was different. Younger, wilder. It came not from memory, but from the future. Whitebeard smiled, tears slipping through the cracks of his grin. "So it's already started, huh? Another fool who laughs at the storm." The wind brushed his face like an answer. He raised his cup to the horizon. "Then drink well, whoever you are. May your laughter shake the world harder than his ever did." Far away, the Grand Line churned with new blood. Hundreds of pirate crews rose in Roger's wake, each chasing the same impossible promise, one piece. But most would die without ever glimpsing the truth he'd left behind. For what Roger had found was not a treasure that could be held. It was the secret heartbeat of the world itself, a truth too heavy for greed, too bright for tyranny.
And so the world spun on. Kings warring, empires trembling, the navy spreading its justice like chains across the sea. Yet under it all, the ocean's laughter grew louder, because for every life taken, another dream was born. The D carried on, not as a name, but as a rhythm, a tide that could not be stilled. In Marie Joie, the air itself trembled. Aimu stood before the world map again, the light of dawn cutting through the stained glass and falling across the red line that split the world in two. A shadow moved behind him, an elder, old enough to remember the age before God Valley. "They sail under your sun, yet still they dream," the elder said quietly. "The pirates multiply. The D spreads again." Imu did not turn, because men forget pain faster than they forget hope. "The boy, the one Garp hides, he bears the name." Imu's gaze hardened. "Then we will erase him too, as we erased the rest." He stepped closer to the map, his finger tracing the Grand Line's curve. "But it won't matter. The world is ours, so long as it forgets how to laugh." The elder hesitated. "And if it remembers?" Aimu smiled faintly, like a knife drawn slowly from a sheath. "Then we drown it again." Down in Fishman Island, deep beneath the crushing dark, Neptune stood before the great sea kings, their immense eyes reflecting the trembling currents. His daughter, Shirahoshi, still a child, slept in her coral cradle nearby, her presence filling the chamber with a gentle hum that rippled through the water. The sea kings whispered in voices that were not sound but vibration, waves of ancient speech that Neptune could feel in his bones. "The voice returns." He swallowed hard. "You mean Rogers?" "No, another. The same laughter, The same will.
Neptune's eyes widened. But the boy hasn't even been born yet. The sea kings shifted, the entire ocean seeming to breathe with them. The sea has already chosen. It always does. Their words faded into the darkness, leaving Neptune trembling. He looked at his sleeping daughter, her hair drifting like gold in the currents. A tear escaped his eye. Then when the time comes, protect him, my child. Protect the boy who will make the sea laugh again. Above the waves, in a quiet village hidden by dawn, Monkey D. Garp stood outside a small wooden house. The air was cool, the smell of seaweed drifting from the shore. Inside, a woman lay weak but smiling, a newborn in her arms. The child was tiny, fierce, eyes blazing even as he slept. Garp looked down at him, and for the first time in years, he smiled without bitterness. "What are you going to name him?" he asked softly. Ruse looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Luffy." Garp chuckled. "Sounds like a fool's name." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe he'll be the right kind of fool." Outside, the sea stirred, a single wave breaking against the shore, gentle as a promise. And as Rouge closed her eyes for the last time, the baby laughed, loud, wild, defiant. The sound carried through the window, over the cliffs, across the sea. Every wave that heard it trembled. The ocean had found its new laughter.
Far across the world, in the ruins of the island that no longer existed, God Valley, bubbles rose from the deep cracks of the seabed. Each bubble shimmered with memory, and in one of them, faintly, the outline of a man appeared, a grin like a wound, eyes like thunder. The sea whispered his name once more, Rox D. Xebec. The ghost of the storm smiled. "So, you found your heir, Roger." He looked upward through miles of black water toward the faint glow of the surface. "Then maybe it's time I found mine." The currents twisted, the ruins groaned, and the sea began to move again. The Laughing King had passed into legend, but his laughter had not vanished, it had simply changed voices. And the silent sea, long dormant, began to stir beneath him. Because the next storm was coming, and the ocean, eternal witness to all dreams, was ready to remember. The sea remembers. Even when the world forgets, when kings rewrite the past and truth sinks beneath centuries of silence, the sea remembers. It remembers every laughter and every tear, every name whispered into its waves, every promise made to the horizon. Because the sea is memory itself. And on that day, beneath the silver dawn of a new age, the ocean stirred as if waking from a long dream. The wind carried the scent of salt and sunrise. The cries of gulls returned to the air. And far, far away, upon a small island at the edge of the East Blue, a boy was born who would laugh louder than the gods. His name would one day echo across the world, Monkey D. Luffy.
The sea already knew it. It had waited for him. Years later, when that boy set sail on a tiny boat with a straw hat and an impossible grin, the world laughed at him. They called him foolish. They called him small. They called him the shadow of a dead man. But the sea knew better, because the sea could hear. The waves felt his heartbeat, the same rhythm that once thundered in the chest of Goldie Roger, the same laughter that once defied the gods at God Valley, the drums of liberation. Not a sound of rebellion, but of remembrance. The world forgot what freedom truly meant, but the sea never did. From the sky islands to the darkest depths,
From Alabasta's deserts to Fishman Island's lightless domes, the sea carried his laughter, and everywhere it went, something awakened. Ancient stones hummed. The whales that once followed Roger rose to the surface again. Even the sea kings stirred in their sleep, whispering in voices that rippled through the deep. It returns, the tide returns. In the depths of the calm belt, Neptune stood before the throne of Poseidon, his hands trembling. The sea kings were calling again, louder now. He closed his eyes and heard their words. The child of laughter sails, the one who will open the world. Tears filled his eyes. The prophecy, the one his ancestors had guarded since the fall of the ancient kingdom, was unfolding.
He looked at his daughter, the awakened Shirahoshi, now fully aware of her power, her voice harmonizing with the sea kings themselves. "Then it's true," he whispered. "Roger's dream lives again." The ocean around him thrummed, not with chaos, but with music. The same song the world once called myth. Far above, on an island cloaked in eternal mist, Silver's Rayleigh sat on a quiet pier, polishing a ship's mast. He paused, lifting his head as the wind brushed his face. He could feel it, faint but familiar, the same rhythm he once heard aboard the Oro Jackson. He smiled. "You found him, didn't you, old friend?" The wind answered with laughter. Rayleigh chuckled. "Then I suppose my part's done. The next age belongs to him now." He stood, gazing toward the horizon. "To the boy who carries your will, the boy who make the world laugh again." In the holy land of Marijoa, panic spread through the halls of power. Reports came in waves, the rise of a pirate with the initial D, the fall of tyrants, the shaking of the seas themselves. The elders gathered once more before Imu, their voices trembling. "It's him," one said. "The laughter has returned." Imu's expression was calm, but his fingers tightened around the armrest of the empty throne. "Then we will remind the world why it learned to fear that sound." He stood, walking toward the window that overlooked the world below. The sea laughs, but laughter can drown.
Outside, the wind howled across the red line, yet even it could not drown out the faint echo of a boy's laughter, carried across every ocean. Far in the new world, where storms never rest, the sea itself began to move. Whirlpools spun in spirals of light, the currents shifted, aligning once more into a single flow, as if returning to the shape the world once had before the age of division. And deep below, something ancient stirred. Not darkness, not malice, but memory. The ruins of the ancient kingdom glowed softly, inscriptions alive again. Their words, silent for centuries, spoke to the waves. "When the laughter returns, the world will remember. The tide will rise, and all will be one again." The sea shivered. The tide began to rise. At the edge of the east blue, Luffy's small boat crested a wave. He stood with arms spread wide, the hat once worn by the pirate king on his head, the wind in his face, the horizon endless before him. He laughed, not to defy the world, but to embrace it. That laughter rolled across the ocean, through every island, every current, every secret corner of the deep. And somewhere far beneath him, the sea whispered the names of those who had come before. Roger, Rox, Joy Boy. The sound of their voices became one, and the sea answered, "At last, you've come home." The world would call him many things: pirate, fool, monster, hero, but the sea knew the truth. He was its echo, the continuation of every dream that refused to die. And when he reached the final island, when he found that treasure that was not gold but laughter itself,
The sea would finally remember everything it had lost. Because the boy who inherited Roger's smile was not just another pirate. He was the sea's own memory, reborn in human form. And when that day comes, when the world laughs together again, the ocean will rest. Not because the storm has ended, but because, for the first time since the dawn of time, the sea will finally be understood. The waves rolled on, the sun rose, and across the endless blue, the laughter of the world echoed, bright, fearless, and free. The sea remembered his name even if the world forgot. Gol D. Roger. Monkey D. Luffy. The will of D. One tide, one dream, one endless laughter.